Volume.
Okay, I will try to speak up a little bit. Is that
Yeah,
any
that's
better?
better. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Hi everyone, Happy New Year. Let me share my screen. Can you see that okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. So again, Happy New Year. My name is Ethan Kraft. I'm on the community engagement team for the PMCM HNTB Lero, presenting on behalf of the Department of Design and Construction for the East Side Coastal Resiliency Project. I'm joined tonight by colleagues from the PMCM, DDC, and our sister agencies for this 53rd meeting. And without further ado, let's just get started. So these will be our main areas of focus tonight. We're kind of touching on most of our key topics. We'll start with hiring events and programming that we're working on, highlight a recent walkthrough we had of Project Area 1, and then as usual, we'll go through each of our contracts, including what we've heard and air quality monitoring for PA1. So beginning with some of our hiring events, we recently met with the Two Bridges Dreams Youth Build program. This is a program with the Two Bridges Neighborhood Council. They offer various trainings and professional assistance, including GED attainment, and then the 10 and the 30 for OSHA. We are continuing to work with broader DDC on potential collaboration opportunities for this group, and we are very much looking forward to that. These are just a couple of the flyers that they sent over to us. It's a really great opportunity benefiting the Two Bridges neighborhood. We also were recently told about a career fair coming up in February in Queens with Workforce One, their Industrial and Transportation Career Center. They have a number of positions available, including commercial drivers and warehouse roles, as well as a few different opportunities at JFK. They had a pretty lengthy list. So that'll be on Thursday, February 13th, and there are sessions at 12 and 1. And then this link you can use to register for that. And we'll have information on both of those things on our website. Moving right along, last week we hosted the Lower East Side Ecology Center so that they could get a look at some of the latest progress in Project Area 1. So here on the left, you can see us walking south towards the Williamsburg Bridge, and then on the right is just a group photo from the end of the visit. So it was really great to have them on site. I think it was their first time there in a while. Okay, these are the three main contracts we're going to cover tonight. Project Area 1, Project Area 2, and Parallel Conveyance. We've updated the map to include the change to the East River Greenway pinch point, which, as we discussed in the last meeting, will now be a separate DDC contract from Esker. Going to our overview of contracts, this is largely the same as it was at the previous meeting, especially for Project Area 1. Things are just kind of moving right along there, but we'll have some updates on some of the key operations here in the next few slides. We continue to have partial closures of East River Park, south of East Houston Street, and then ball fields 7 and 8 north of East Houston Street. The Greenway is closed up to East 10th Street, and then there's portions of Corlears Hook Park that are closed as well. Otherwise, we have ongoing utility work, flood wall activities, retaining wall at East Houston Street, and then the deep sewer work is really starting to get underway in ball fields 7 and 8 after last month's closures. And then ball fields 1 and 2 are open in the southern area of the park, and we continue to make progress on the amphitheater area, the tennis courts, and the basketball courts in that area. For parallel conveyance, we do have that daytime road closure of Jackson Street that facilitates deep sewer work and utility relocation that is ongoing. We have a bit of an update on that in a little bit. And then further north at Lewis and Delancey Streets, East Houston and Columbia Streets, we have some utility relocations and test pits. And then at the furthest end of that contract, more utility relocations and then some test piles ongoing in that area. Project Area 2, no real updates, although we do have a small advisory this week that I will highlight in just a moment. So into Project Area 1. On the southern ends of this contract, near areas 1 and 2, flood wall and floodgate operations are continuing. We have some nice photos of that progress here in a few slides. Near Corlears Hook Park, we have some work on overhead sign structure foundation. There's also a photo of that and an advisory related to that, which I will go over. In areas 4 and 5, there's more restoration work being done and park finishes, including the amphitheater and basketball court, as I mentioned. North of the Williamsburg Bridge in area 6, tennis court construction, Esplanade reconstruction are continuing. And then even further north, more progress on the buried flood wall, East Houston Street retaining wall. And then in field 7 and 8, we have that deep sewer work and test pits. And then on East 10th Street, ongoing utility and deep sewer work, which I'll talk more about in a moment. Along the FDR, we have various lane closures. I just wanted to touch on the progress at Grand Street. Much of that work is complete. The FDR has been largely restored from some of that night work that we were going over in the last meeting. Eventually, another crossing will be made at Cherry Street. That's still a few months away, so we don't have a whole lot of concrete details on that, but we will keep everyone posted and provide advisories as needed. There won't be any night work across the FDR for that crossing for quite a while. At East 10th Street, after last month's microtunneling operation success, sewer work is just kind of continuing in that area. So the daytime road and sidewalk closures along the service road are continuing, and access is still being restored at the end of each day. So that will be ongoing for about the first 4 months of the year. So a few weeks ago, we had a similar advisory to this one, overnight FDR Drive intermittent closures. This will happen again this weekend from 1 a.m. Saturday to 7 a.m. Saturday. And this just facilitates the transport of heavy construction equipment for the overhead sign structure foundations that I mentioned. And I'll have a photo of that machine on the next slide. This entails overnight northbound and southbound FDR Drive, intermittent traffic stoppages of individual lanes, and then a full stoppage for 5 to 10 minutes each, just to get that machine from Corlears Hook Park back to East River Park. So this is the machine in question there on the left. You can see it is drilling the hole for the shaft for the overhead sign structure. This is just north of the Corlears Hook Bridge, between Delancey and Corlears Hook, but closer to Corlears Hook Park. And then on the right, as mentioned, this is the flood wall under the FDR Drive, on the water side of the FDR, just the rebar reinforcement before the concrete is poured and backfill operations under the FDR there. Across the street at Montgomery Street and near Gouverneur Gardens, a lot of progress has been made on that flood wall, especially along Montgomery Street. You can see in these photos here, they have started backfilling it. The flood wall is covered there with a black tarp. There's still more work to be done in this area, but this is just some good progress on that Montgomery side of that flood wall. Back into East River Park, just an update on our planting, which has largely stopped for the season at nearly 500 trees planted. It's actually 499 trees planted so far, and then approximately 18,000 shrubs, perennials, and grasses have been planted. The next planting season will begin in March. It's weather dependent, so it could be a little early or a little late, just depending on the weather. But here are two great photos of some of the trees and shrubs planted along with mulch. The left is there near ball fields 1 and 2, and then the photo on the right is under the Williamsburg Bridge along the Esplanade. And there's a few other photos of the planting progress that we presented at Community Board 3 earlier this month, so you can find those on our website. Also, late last year, we refreshed some of our signage at East Houston Street to kind of make our language a little bit more consistent and improve the visibility of the detour there. So these photos are just a handful of the signs. We've tried to add some signs where there weren't, and then again, just kind of clean up the language and make it more consistent to improve wayfinding for that detour. Moving right on to what we've heard, just a quick update on the Section 106 process for the Fireboat House. The city let us know that they are consulting with New York State, and they hope to have a comprehensive response to the alternatives analysis comments for the consulting parties in the next few weeks. So that process is ongoing. We are still working on a timeline for future amenities this year, and we will have that to you as soon as possible. We are eager to get some of that information, and we will share it with you as soon as we can. And then here I will turn it over to Luke, who I believe is on the call to discuss these temporary restrooms near the track and field. If he's there. I see him there.
Hey, Luke, are you there?
So sorry, guys.
No worries.
Yeah, so the Porta Johns, thankfully we got a donation from, a private person who was able to get these 4 Porta Johns to offset the closures during the winter. And then we anticipate in the springtime that we'll be able to open the East 10th Street bathroom as well as the track house. That's all I
All
got.
right. Thank you, Luke. Um,
Oh, I have a quick question. Why were the bathrooms closed?
Yeah, so we're still having heating based off of some long-standing Con Ed issue in both of those facilities. And so anytime we don't have heating in one of them, that would lead to the pipes eventually bursting if we keep the water running. So we were forced to close it. And my understanding is that Con Ed isn't planning on fixing the work because, the bathrooms are going to go under obviously long-term renovation in connection to Esker in the next year or so. So that's why they're closed for this season.
Thanks.
Alrighty, thank you, Luke. Moving on to our air quality monitoring, environmental reporting. For December, these were the locations of the air quality monitors for Project Area 1, mostly in East River Park. It was a good month. We had about 5 alerts between Jackson Street and East 6th Street. And each of those alerts were around a half hour or less, and we applied dust mitigation measures to alleviate each of those. On to parallel conveyance. Location 1 near Jackson Street, that is that daytime road closure I mentioned earlier. Currently now, I think that they're mostly focused on utility relocation before they get into that very deep sewer excavation to install the new sewer there. And then elsewhere in that area, just utility relocation around the park and stuff like that. At locations 2 and 3, we have other utility relocations and test pits. At East Houston and Columbia, some electric relocation. And then in areas 5 and 6, we have Con Ed utility relocations, as well as test piles and test pits. Here's some photos from parallel conveyance. On the left, you can see there's a Con Edison electrical layout. That's in Avenue D. In the middle, there's a manhole installation in East Houston Street, and then steam main slip joint relocation in Avenue C and East 18th Street. So just to give you an idea of the broad range of activities that are being done under that contract. And then we will finish up with Project Area 2, which is largely complete with all areas open aside from that Solar One area, which is separate from the Esker project. I mentioned having an advisory. We have some FDR Drive night work between East 15th and East 17th Street to facilitate testing for overhead sign footing. The work hours for that are 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. and it involves a closure of a northbound lane and a southbound lane on the FDR Drive. This should be complete in the next couple of days. They've been doing that work for about a week, so it should be finishing up any day now. And with that, I will move on to questions.
Thank you, Ethan. Does anyone have any questions? Frank, go ahead.
Thanks and Happy New Year, everybody. Ethan, 2 quick questions. One is, Before your time, there were a lot of discussions on additional lighting underneath the FDR right at the base of Montgomery Street. So near that photo that you showed for the rebar. I just wondered, I wouldn't expect you to have an answer now, but if anyone ever followed up on that and what the update would be, because I know, yeah, exactly, on the right-hand side here. It's very dark, and that's a crossing, and it's a crossing that we are sensitive over here in the area of Gouverneur Gardens, Vladeck, etc., into Pier 42. So if you can just take that back and see if anyone ever kind of followed up on that and where we landed on any
Absolutely.
additional above head lighting. And then I'm not sure if you can answer this, but just knowing some of the issues with the parallel conveyance on Water Street, with understanding some of the lines, and I know that it's complicated. There are easements, there are things that are not listed. But do you know where we are on the overall schedule for the work? Are we on target? Are we like a little bit behind or ahead of that curve?
I don't know. As far as I know, the project is still on track, but I will double check with the team tomorrow and circle back with you.
Okay, well, that was it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Frank.
Wendy?
Hi, everybody. On this same slide, on the right-hand side where the rebar is, that's all going to be a wall, right?
Correct, yes.
And where are the pedestrians and bicyclers?
So
the-
the shared use path will be on the southern end, so it'll be closer to Pier 42.
So right in this area, this really underscores what Frank was asking about the lighting under the bridge. It's going to be very dark there with that wall there. And
Yes.
so, and it was really something that I remember Val showing up at meetings long before the CAG formed to make sure there'd be lighting under there, and Valentina Jones. And I really hope there will be. It's very important to people's sense of security there.
Yes, we'll check on that and I will share it with you guys as soon as I have an answer.
Thank you. And then I was going to ask about the picnic area. There's a lot of concrete underneath the Williamsburg Bridge where you can see picnic tables are getting placed. I thought that was supposed to be sort of a grassy area. How did it become a picnic zone?
So there's a picnic area under the FDR. Sort of like this photo that's here on the right is
You mean-
directly under the bridge.
Okay.
And to the north, there's picnic tables right here. And then there's picnic tables sort of behind the perspective of the photo. And then next to those picnic tables, that would be sort of behind us in this photo, there's the full lawn, and then there's this plant. Sorry, I'm looking at a map. There's this planting area, and then the footing of the Williamsburg Bridge that is to the left here, outside of frame, that is also grassy or planted.
Because that was always a noisy area in the
Mhm.
past, right under the bridge. And
Right.
we know, if you walked there all the time, you'd see it was always dripping, and there was drainage coming off the bridge long after it stopped raining.
Mhm.
How did that get selected, that area for picnicking?
I'm not sure what the design considerations were there. But we can present a more in-depth sort of view of that area at the next CAG if you'd like.
That would be great. People are really curious about it. They're worried about lack of shade, et cetera. So thank you. I'd like that.
You got it.
Oops, Diane, you're next.
Okay, I think this might be a question for Luke, but possibly for Ethan too. And this is the question, one of the questions I sent to you, Paula, is that there are tree guards around some of the trees up at the north end of East River Park by the anchor. I believe they were put in place originally to protect the trees while Con Ed was working up there, but Con Ed seems to be done. Just wondering if they can come down now. They're kind of falling apart anyway. So if just wondering if it's possible to remove them now.
Yeah, I can take that one. So we did get that request. It was verified that it wasn't connected to the escrow work, and I've routed it to Con Ed at this point. I'm going to give them till maybe Monday, Tuesday of next week to get a response, and then I'll just start hounding them. But I think you're likely right that it can come down, and it was just a kind of a something that should have been removed when they stopped the other construction work.
Great.
So we'll ideally have an update in the next week and a half, 2 weeks.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions for Ethan or Luke? Well, all right. I guess we can transition to the CAG only portion. Another short meeting. Thank you, Ethan and Luke.
Thank you.
All right. So as we usually do, well, actually, maybe we should just like last time, maybe we should just power through. Usually we take a 1 to 2 minute break, but since the presentation and question session was so short, let's just continue. So we have a guest tonight from the Light the Track advocacy group. And we talked about that a little bit about that in previous meetings, but Jason Foymowitz is here tonight. And I put him on the agenda because he asked. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Jason, so you can talk to the CAG about the efforts that you're trying to organize.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much for having me. LikeTheTrack.org, it's a small grassroots organization. We set up a petition online, shared on social media. We have up to 700 signatures now, calling for lighting to be added to the renovated track at East River Park as a part of the ESCR project. Just a quick summary is the track's not fully lit today. It has these temporary lights that are all around it that are very effective, that are not entirely effective and don't last very long, the batteries for them. As far as I was able to tell in my research, it seemed like the reason that lighting wasn't added as a part of ESCR was that nobody asked for it, not that there was any objection to adding lighting. I would be very interested in feedback from this group on if there was objection or if there's anybody has any background on how the reasoning that it might have been left out. But also just open to questions. Basically, our case is that the track is heavily used. It's heavily used after dark, despite the lack of light there today. It's the only running track south of 135th Street in Manhattan. It's the only regulation running track. There's a couple smaller and sort of non-standard tracks elsewhere in Manhattan, but it's the only fully standard running track. One of 2 running tracks south of 133rd. The only one south of 135th Street in Manhattan. And also notably, the one at 135th Street, Riverbank Park, is fully lit. Basically, we think that lighting would make the track more accessible to people throughout the year, especially in darker months where light is sunsets very early. Would generally improve safety year round on the track and would encourage more use for people who aren't comfortable using it as it gets dark and when it's dark like it is today. And then lastly, just pointing to Brooklyn's McCarran Park is fully lit. And it's really just a nice pleasant space that people are running in the evening hours, or just a place that people can use the field and be outside after dark. I've used it fairly regularly. It's pretty pleasant to be around. And basically, we see this as an opportunity to get lighting installed as part of this project. Sort of a once in a decade opportunity to potentially have this done if we miss the opportunity now. That's sort of my spiel. Would love any feedback in terms of concerns with lighting, whether or not there's background on why that wasn't there.
Frank, go ahead.
Hey Jason, thanks for coming and sharing. I missed the first like 30 seconds. Did you, because I had to just take a call, did you say lighting, were you asking about lighting not included in Esker in general or more specifically to the track exclusively?
Specifically to this track,
Okay.
yeah. So my understanding is that there's plans for like street lamp type lighting, but not like full flood lighting like on the baseball fields that are there today.
I can't help you with that. I just wanted to clarify what the ask was. Okay, maybe someone else can. Sorry.
Yeah,
Thanks.
absolutely. And I should also add, in terms of next steps for me, I'm also planning on speaking at Community Board Three's Parks. I forget, Parks and Waterfront Committee early next month. I'm hoping to get a resolution of support from them, and then going to try to work with some local elected officials, particularly Kristen Rivera, Carolina Rivera's office, to see if we can work with her to help secure some funding and some change requests.
Diane, you are next, and after you is Michael.
Okay. Hi, Jason. So I'm a frequent user of the track, including at night. And I think my question is, I think you just explained that you're advocating for full flood lighting in the way that the ball fields are lit. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And so I think, it's great to have the track lit. I appreciate it in the winter months, being able to, run there without tripping over other people. But I do, I think, and this might be a broader question for all of the lighting, is that, obviously we don't want it on all night. It's the waterfront. It's really disruptive to, wildlife and that sort of thing as the park begins to repopulate. And so, I don't think there's any reason that people didn't, talk about this, during the project construction. I think there's just generally a concern that, you don't want floodlights blazing on the ball fields or the track all night long. And I would want to see that they would be able to shut off after a certain point, depending on what park operations wants and that sort of thing. So that is my comment. Be happy to have lights, just don't want them on all night.
Yeah, and I think following whatever schedule is in place for the ball fields, I think would be appropriate. I know that McCarran's Parks lights are on until 10 p.m. So I would say it's standard for the lights to shut off at a reasonable hour. But I'm not sure what the lighting schedule is on the ball fields. But yeah, I agree. There's no need for them to be all night. But having access in the evening hours, it would really extend the use of the track quite a bit.
Yep.
Yeah, the ball field lights go off, I think, at 10 o'clock. And I think, and I'm probably wrong, but I think that they're also only turned on when the ball field is permitted for that night, for a game that night.
I will say I've noticed on being on the track after dark that the empty field is very well lit mostly.
Okay.
Yeah, that's kind of a recent development. I think really since, the park got so much smaller with Esker. In the past, it was only lit during permitted times. But I think Parks has been making an effort to light up more of the park since we don't have as much space as we used to.
That makes sense.
So just to sort of address some of the questions that you mentioned. So I used to be on the community board and I used to be on the Parks Committee. So I will say that I don't remember any discussion of all of the various iterations of designs that we got for Esker for there ever to be lighting in there. So it's not something that was there and then got taken away. I don't think it was just ever incorporated because I don't think the old track had it either. The old track only was lit by street lamps, which is the plan for the new track. And I think you're down this path already, but I would suggest that because both the borough president and the city council members have access to capital funding, because the odds of you getting this added to Esker is minimal. They're just going to say it's not in the budget, we're not doing it. So it's gonna have to be done as a separate capital campaign. And for that, you would need to go to the borough president, to the city council members, and also the community board has their own capital funding list that they keep, that they rank. That each committee keeps their own list and they rank it in importance of order. So when the time comes, they give that list to the respective city agency, and then the agency sort of goes down the list until they run out of funding. So those are the three avenues that I think are your best shot at this point.
Thanks. Yeah, that makes sense.
Christine.
Thank you. Yeah, I just have a few comments about floodlights. I'm not a runner, but I do use the park. And from my previous experience with floodlights, especially in ball field 1 and 2, they were on and blazing all the time, even when nobody was there to use the ball field. It's a tremendous waste of energy. For some reason there, I don't know whether these new floodlights will be better, but there was no timer to take them off. I feel it very disruptive for park user, and also what Diane brought up for wildlife, to really have a track like this lit up with floodlights. I'm wondering whether there's other less invasive things one could do to bring more lighting onto the track. I'm not saying it's a bad idea, but where it's not necessarily this full-blown floodlights, which they blind you when you walk on the Esplanade. And also, I don't know how people who live right across from it feel about that, because I'm sure that also affects them. So just want to caution a little bit about it, because my experience has been with floodlights, they're full blown on or they're off, and not ideal, I would say.
Yeah, part of the goal of going to the community board is to hopefully get some feedback from residents across from the park, and to see if they have if there's objection from the community there. In terms of alternative options, I think that's potentially viable as well. But my main concern on sort of more dim light would be just feeling and perception of safety. I think there's a pretty big difference between how people feel about using a facility when it's fully lit and clear and sort of passable. So while I agree with the concerns on wildlife, I think setting the timers and shutting them off at a reasonable hour would be preferable to something dimmer. But especially because there's other parts of the park today that are lit with the floodlights, and this isn't a net new addition to the park.
Wendy?
Oh, hi. I'm glad you brought this up. I actually think you should talk to Audubon. That is part of the very important bird migration point, East River Park. There were 500 species counted in the park the year before they took the trees down. So, and they're returning now to Sty Cove. We want them to return to East River Park as well. And it would be sad if it was the track lighting that kind of wreck their habitat. So another time. And there used to be a big floodlight in the track that kind of blinded you as you went around. That's not ideal either, but there must be some examples. And I suggest, if you can, bring in possibilities to the community board meeting so people can get a sense of what the alternatives might be, and even what they might even cost to operate, because that's going to be a key point as well. Solar is also possible. Thanks.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments for Jason? All right. Well, is there anything else that you want to say, Jason?
No, thanks for the interest and the feedback and for having me. Appreciate it. Also, check out the website, lightthetrack.org, basically lays out the case for it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Well, the other agenda item I had was actually suggested by Diane. And it was that if you guys remember in November, you guys started drafting a letter, and then I kind of like, put it together, a letter to DDC about your concerns, mostly related, to shade and, the tricky aspect of how we're going to get enough shade in the park as while we wait for a lot of the plantings that will provide shade to actually grow in the years that will take to happen. And the city responded, and there were responses to your questions from both parks and DDC. But as Diane pointed out to me the other day, the CAG hasn't really responded to their response. So that's why we put this on the agenda for today. But Diane, do you want to I have the letter open. Do you want to kind of kick off this conversation?
So I don't have the letter open, but if you could find the spot where they are talking about their expectation of the shrubs and the grass growing quickly to provide shade, that would be really helpful.
Okay.
I don't want to quote it from memory.
Yeah. So they're saying that there are many fast. Is someone
Sorry.
saying something?
No, I said, Diane said it would be helpful, and I said probably somewhat comical as well.
Yeah, it is kind of comical as I remember it. So,
Well, I think this is what you're talking about. So they're saying there are many fast growing plants in the Esker plant palette, and many of the shrub perennial areas are in places where people will congregate. And then they list these, fast growing species that they've planted, and their mature height. Is that the comical part?
well, and then there's a part about the grass. They've planted grasses, I think, as part, the native plantings. I don't mean like the lawn, but like grasses.
Yeah, perennials, grasses, and they have them. Then there are these Latin names that I can't pronounce, but yeah, a whole list of grasses, and their mature height, their full height ranges from 3 feet, 3 to 4 feet, 3 to 7 feet. So
Okay.
just, yeah, the notion of like a grass that's 3 feet long as a shade provider, maybe for insects, but not for people.
Yes, exactly. That was exactly the part that I thought was kind of comical because, I understand that over time, some of the shrubs will get tall and, there will be a little bit of shade provided by that. But I think that, the suggestion that shrubs and beach grasses basically are going to shade people, overhead is comical, as Michael said.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to, bring that up and sort of ask if other people are interested in pursuing this because I think Luke has tried to experiment with some inexpensive shade solutions. I think the feedback that he got was, yeah, this has helped. And so we seem to be stuck on the fact that the city is maintaining that it's fine. The shrubs are going to grow, the grasses are going to grow. And so we don't need to provide any shade structures or any sort of, way of shading anybody. And I disagree with that. And so I just wanted to bring it back to the CAG and say, do we want to keep talking to them about this?
I'm going to call on Wendy since she raised her hand first, and then Dina.
Hi, I was off for a second and maybe you were referring to a specific document or just the general plan. But I went and measured the temperature down both at the little piece of shade camouflage that Luke put up, and it made a 2-degree difference. And then I walked up to Sty Cove. This was on a hot day. And where there was shade from the sunflowers and the blue stems, etc., it was about 12 to 15 degrees cooler. So it shaded the sidewalk, which in turn kept you cooler. So I don't feel like it's a loss. And I see Dina has her hand up and maybe she has more info on that. So I just want to say, I don't think that it's a loss. The plants, especially native plants, transpire. They give off, you know, moisture, and this also helps us feel cooler. So I'll stop there. Dina, I guess.
Thanks, Wendy. Yeah, I would say that probably the number one complaint that we've gotten about the park redesign in the summer is that why is it brutally hot with no shade? And people love those sunflowers. That's part of the reason why we left them. And yeah, this idea that no, the grasses and the shrubs are not going to grow fast enough to create shade for where people are sitting, and no, neither will the honey locust trees. And absolutely, I think it's worth continuing to push for it. We haven't yet had an opportunity to install the extra shade structures that we got funded through the city council last year. I think that's going to happen when we get closer to finishing the I mean, because I'll also tell you that, you know, now they are going to rip up all of the concrete on the Esplanade and repave it because number one, it is out of ADA compliance. In some places, I think just very slightly, and in other places more dramatically. And also, that concrete aggregate has been crumbling away. So, you know, it's really disheartening that, you know, we would hope that when you're rebuilding up an urban park in the 2020s, that you would have some consciousness about the climate impact of the work that you're doing. And instead, you know, 4 or 5 blocks worth of cement is now going to be tossed in the trash and replaced with more emissions producing cement. I mean, it's does not give one a lot of faith in the people that are supposed to know what they're doing about projects like this. But I definitely think like we should keep pushing. It's ridiculous, especially now that we've had this experience of a couple of summers in Sty Cove where people have been so miserable. It's ridiculous for them to say that it's not necessary. It's totally necessary. And I'll stop there.
So, Dina, did you appeal to, you know, Esker and or EDC
We did.
to provide shade structures and they refused to do it? So is that why you ended up with
Yeah.
city council funded?
Basically anything that we've asked them to do, like, you know, can you move the benches out of the wake zone so that people are not getting splashed with river water every time a ferry goes by? Their knee-jerk response to every request to change something is, well, that's up to DDC design and we're just construction. All we can do is follow the plans that have been approved. Meanwhile, of course, there have been plenty of points where they have not done that at all, according to the convenience of the contractor. And then, so we asked, because DDC Design certainly will not talk to Solar One, we asked EDC to please reach out to them to discuss, and they have, and they won't talk to EDC about it either. So there was no avenue to get any kind of design change once the project got approved. And of course, I still don't know who actually signed off on the final plan. I don't know who, like, if they talk to somebody at EDC, I don't know who that is. There's so much turnover at EDC, it's quite possible that somebody did approve it, but that person left, you know, 4 years ago. It's turned into such an untransparent and super frustrating process that, yeah, that's basically how it's turned out and how it's gone.
Thanks, Dina.
You're welcome. I wish I had happier news, but it's been terrible.
Yeah.
It's good to know. Um, Dina, did you have specific shade structures that you were recommending? Like, for instance, we just advised Jason to do some research on whether there are lights that can be on a timer or something, to come back with a specific proposal that the community could react to about the lighting. Did you have specific shade structure recommendations, or were you just?
So we just went out and took a look at some things that we thought might work, considering that, we would like to put them, over places where people are sitting. We also have to, be conscious of how easily, any sort of protective structure in the park can become an encampment. I mean, we've been having a lot of issues with people living in the park that's kind of like spillover from the extremely contentious flea market on 14th Street. So, as a result, I think what we came up with were like these cantilever shades with fabric on the top of them. I don't know. I can share what we looked at with the CAG. I can send that information to Paula and she can share it with everybody. So you
Yeah,
guys can get an idea of what we're looking at.
I think that would be great, because I think that, our next step would be, if the CAG wants to pursue this, is to go back to them with specific recommendations. I think part of that might be telling them where we think shade could be useful. And then if we have some ideas for shade structures, I'm not an expert on that stuff, but if you have some examples, and I know that, folks on CAG also visit other parks and other waterfront areas. And if we see examples of what we want there, I think maybe if we come back to them and say specifically, we think that you should do this, something like this in these places, then that takes it to the next level of, there's a specific ask and not just like to define the grass will shade you.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
That'd be great.
Frank just put in the chat that he'd greatly appreciate any shade recommendation structures that others have researched. So that's
Paula.
Mhm.
Hey, it's Robin. I have my hand up.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Robin.
Yeah, I've done that research before. I can send. Should I just share it with you, Paula? And I know I was trying to bring up a picture like Union Square playground. There are these, pole tent structures that are very easy to go up, and they would not be any place that anyone would want to camp under. But who should we share those stuff with you, Paula? And then you'll share it with. Okay.
Yep.
And I feel like, that we're recommending the Parks Department what kind of shade structures just seems kind of ridiculous. I just had one question. I don't know if I noticed I didn't get to really see it on the map today. Maybe it's a question for next time, but we're talking about the hazardous materials and stuff like that, and building of the park. There's a new section of the park that is being built right north of you know what? I'm going to retract this because I don't exactly know where it is. I'll be in touch with you, Paul. I noticed a new area of the park that's being built, and it's very high up, and it's so close to the FDR Drive. I'll let you. I'll share it with you. Maybe we can talk about it at our next meeting.
Okay.
Clarity on it, but I was really shocked to see this very high up in the air structure that looked like a field or a walkway, but big drop down. So.
All right. Well, Diane, so I guess next steps are people are gonna send me some examples of shade structures they've seen elsewhere that might work. And then I don't know what how we want to take it from there, but then the other aspect of it is maybe a few CAG members could like sit down and look at a map of the park and figure out what locations you guys would recommend for receiving shade structures. Does that sound right, or is there anything
Yeah,
else you want to
I
say,
think that
Diane?
sounds like a good idea.
Uh-huh. Okay, well, once we get some ideas about shade structures, I'll reach out to the CAG and, kind of maybe see if we can convene a subgroup of the CAG to put some geography to this request.
Do you think it would be useful to get any health information, data about places without shade, how that affects people's health? Do they use the park as much? Do they get sunburned? Is there any kind of compilation of shade versus no shade on public health? I don't know.
May I make a comment, Paula? Or just to what Wendy said, I don't really feel, Wendy, that we need that unless someone wants to do that extra work, because I think the position should be that there's not enough shade. And so I don't know that we would want to seek to prove that. I think we should just be pushing for what is going to be the best way to get the most amount of shade that is stable. Not to discredit what you're saying, it just seems like more work. And I mean, I feel like that's a CAG position. If we need to take it as a vote, we could, but I'm sure everyone probably feels similar that there's a dearth of shade all along these new parks that they're developing. But that's just me. I mean, I'm happy to support that, but my assumption is the position is that we think that there's more need for shade.
I think it's obvious too, but here's an article from national parks on the importance of shade. I'm just going to stick it in that same shade document.
That's perfect. Yeah.
Anything
Yeah,
I
yeah.
find,
Yeah.
and then it's in one place.
And thank you for that document too. I just looked it over and Dina and everybody else.
All right. Is there any other topic we should talk about? All right. Well, I guess we can adjourn then. I do want to thank Diane for bringing up this topic. And I look forward to getting examples from you guys about shade structures and, yeah, again, facilitating a meeting to put them on a map so we can respond to the city. So without further ado, I guess if no one has anything else to say, we can adjourn. Tara, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just very quickly. Again, I said this at the top of the meeting. I accidentally sent you all a link to my personal room, which didn't impact this meeting, but you'll probably get another meeting invite, just replacing our CAG room, putting it back. So next month we'll be back in the CAG room, but it doesn't really have any material impact other than, yeah, no, it's not noticeable, but I'd rather just have it in a separate room. So that's all.
Sounds good.
All right, everyone.
Ready?
Have a good night, everyone.
Yes. Good night.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Happy New Year.